Hello, everyone. I don't want to start off the week with bad news, but we have no choice. We could be headed back into a dump of the upper 30,000s, maybe even the mid 30,000s, but most likely upper 30,000s. And because there is another source of dumping funds, we know the entire last dump down to 38,000 was basically caused by FTX dumping over $1 billion in just a few days after the GBTC converted into an ETF because there were just a lot of outflows. The fees were enormous, and basically FTX had to liquidate as well. So I think all in all, it was like $5 billion out of outflows, most of which was sucked up by BlackRock and Fidelity. But the extra 1 point something billion dollars worth of flows was from FTX, and that could not be sucked up, and that's why we dumped from 46 down all the way to 38. Now, there's another $1.4 billion that may need to be absorbed. Now, this time it might be a little bit better because the rest of Grayscale is not dumping anymore, or not very much anyways, because the people that wanted to sell Grayscale and move to BlackRock and Fidelity have already done so at this point. But this is a big outflow, and it could easily take us down to the upper 30,000s, maybe even mid 30,000s, but most likely upper 30,000s. And we have this. Genesis seeks approval to sell nearly $1.4 billion in GBT's assets. You can also thank Sam Bankman-Fried for his contribution to this, because remember when FTX fell apart, Genesis, like Gemini, DCG, they all fell apart, and now this is just unraveling. Is this the last batch of big Bitcoin sales? It might be. I don't remember any others. I don't think the Celsius stuff actually pertains to this, but $1.4 billion in GBTC sales, it's even greater than the $1.1 billion that FTX sold themselves. But remember, there's not that extra selling pressure from buy the rumor, sell the news. There's also not the extra selling pressure from like just hordes of people trying to dump GBTC right now. And of course, the inflows from Grayscale and BlackRock have overtaken the Grayscale outflows. So that will mitigate some of this, but I'm not really sure if they can absorb 1.4 billion. Now, I also don't know when they're actually going to sell the $1.4 billion. They're seeking court approval right now, and they're probably going to get it in fairly fast order because they need to pay out creditors, including Gemini Earn. So Gemini Earn clients, you might be getting some money back, but unfortunately for you, if you're getting Bitcoin back, they will probably be worth less because they are going to dump it. Although I do expect a fast recovery from this, just like we had a fast recovery from 38,000. So basically, Grayscale Investments' newly converted spot Bitcoin exchange traded fund ETF is set to see even more outflows because bankrupt crypto lender Genesis wants to liquidate 1.4 billion worth of shares in the Grayscale GBTC Trust because that's how much Genesis actually has, and they are bankrupt, so they need to liquidate. So they filed on January 2nd. They sought permission to sell a total of 1.38 billion in GBTC shares, 169 million in Grayscale Ethereum shares, and 38 million in Grayscale Ethereum Classic. So Ethereum Classic might actually be taking a dip too. We don't really care about those right now. Bitcoin is the main thing. And of course, some of these shares are from the initial collateral at Genesis that pledged to Gemini, and Gemini is suing them hard for it. And of course, Gemini actually sent a notice to Genesis saying that it had foreclosed on the initial GBTC shares promised through a private sale. So this is probably going to go through probably within the next month. If this actually dumps, which I think it probably will, so you might want to hold off your money until this is actually done dumping, because we might get like 38, 37,000 again. Once this is done dumping, we'll be close enough to the halving that I'm pretty sure we'll just pretty much go up from there. But this might actually dump to 38, 37,000 again. I'm hoping it's a little bit better than the last dump because the rest of the outflow from Grayscale has essentially stopped. But some of the inflows from BlackRock and Fidelity have gone down as well because you're not having that initial buying anymore. But overall, there's net inflow from the ETFs right now, but that's not counting this. So I would say expect some dumping in February because of this. When you want prices to go down, you actually have to find a reason, and this is one of those reasons. FTX dumped about the same amount, slightly less, went down to 38K, but that was with the help of the initial outflows of Grayscale. Essentially, this GBTC stuff from Genesis, it's going to probably have the same effect, in my opinion. So, you might want to save your money for after this happens or for March. There's going to be mounting pressure to get that price ever higher as the halving actually comes. But for right now, you might want to hold some dry powder for when this dumps. I'm sure like alts will actually dump as well once BTC dumps. And after this might be the last hump before we actually go very, very high. So the other part of it is the Bitcoin ETFs have topped the charts. They're like the Bitcoin ETFs, both the BlackRock and the Fidelity one, are in the top 10 of all ETFs, and that's pretty insane considering like the mutual funds and stuff that invest in ETFs. If you actually look at this, you have Fidelity at number 10, BlackRock at number 8. And then you have like, then you have like the top one obviously is the core S&P 500 ETF, Vanguard S&P 500. So like they're competing with like S&P 500 funds, like Dow Jones funds, NASDAQ funds, like all these. They're competing with all the ETFs and they're top 10 of all ETF inflows. So like I said, this should actually mitigate a whole lot of the sales of 1.4, but it's not going to mitigate the entire thing because it is still sort of mitigating the it's still sort of mitigating the Grayscale stuff. Now, Grayscale had about 5.7 billion in estimated outflows over the month, while BlackRock and Fidelity have totaled 4.8 billion. So the thing is like what's happening is like there's a net loss of $0.9 billion so far, but Grayscale dumped over $1 billion. So if it wasn't for the Grayscale thing, the flow would actually be positive, no doubt. And that would have actually had positive traction after the ETF. But since Grayscale had, since FTX had to sell, like we have like negative $0.9 billion traction so far. So the thing is like most of that negative traction is gone, so that won't build on top of the 1.4, but the 1.4 from Genesis should actually bring us down maybe to the upper 30,000s area. So yeah, not very good analysis right now, but it is what it is, and we got to just like kind of live with it. And that is the source of another dump. Now, I'm not 100% sure this is going to happen, but this is way, way more solid than like, MT, like Mt. Gox dumping or something from Silk Road. This is forced liquidation exactly like FTX, and they're filing for the ability to sell right now. So you got to pay attention to this. So yeah, not very good news to start the week, but we have another good piece of news. So the El Salvador president, Bakuli, the one that made Bitcoin legal tender, has won his re-election with 87% of the vote. Now, that sounds like Vladimir Putin winning with 95% of the vote, which we all know is a fake election. But this one's actually real because Bakuli is highly popular in his country. He has basically cut crime down to basically zero, stopped the gangs altogether, thrown all the gang members in jail. Now, I do not think that would work in a country like this one because he literally had to put everyone in jail, like everyone that was least suspected of something. There didn't need to be any proof. Basically, if you had a tattoo, he would throw you in jail. If we did that in the United States, I think a lot of people that are innocent would actually be in jail. So, because the violence was so bad in El Salvador, people were willing to put up with it. Like, they would be willing to have their son in jail if it meant that, their other kids or their daughter could go out in the street without being raped or killed. So that's kind of the trade-off they made, and Bakuli is massively popular. Although there is a lot of probably people that had nothing to do with the gangs, just had a tattoo, that's in jail. But, there's obviously going to be a trade-off for that hard of a crackdown. The politicians that want to do this in other South American countries have not been as successful, and also they just haven't really gotten voted in. But that means Bitcoin will continue to be legal tender in El Salvador, and I think like people in Argentina and other parts of South America are going to look at El Salvador as an example. And I do believe El Salvador at this point is pretty much almost in the profit at this point, although they did buy somewhere more closer to the top than, let's say, Michael Saylor. But overall, I think this week is going to be okay. I don't think the court order is actually going to come down this week for them to liquidate. It's probably going to be in the week or the week following. So by the end of February, early March, that's when you should get like the low and buy-in. If you see like news, I'll be reporting on it all along, but if we see news that the $1.4 billion is completely sold out, plan to buy in like a day or two afterwards, because that's probably going to be where you're getting your low price for Bitcoin, because there's no other obvious sources of selling Bitcoin after that. But $1.4 billion is a large amount, and it should have about the same effect on the market as the initial FTX sell right after the ETF. So that's the news for today. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe, hit that bell notifications button. Thank you, and have a nice day.